Now we're actually recording.
All right.
All right. All right. So the first time we see Old Joe, he's sent back. He escapes, but that's not the actual first time he's sent back, right?
Yeah,
the second time we see it is the first time.
Exactly. If we were following the timeline strictly narratively, we would start at the beginning of the movie. We would get up to that point. Old Joe would show up with the sack on. He would kill him. He would close his loop, go overseas. We'd see his life in China. We would see them come for him, and then he would be sent back, and then it would pick up with young Joe's story of, holy shit, now what happens?
Yeah.
The reason I made the break and decided to kind of invert it was the problem with that, narratively, is our main character is now, for all intents and purposes, Old Joe.
Yeah.
Because now we're following him, whereas I wanted the protagonist to be young Joe. So at that first encounter, I wanted to see that through young Joe's eyes and stick with young Joe's perspective on it.
All right, but the problem is now if you do that way, how does the Rainmaker get... if Old Joe doesn't come back to kill the Rainmaker, how does the Rainmaker come to be?
Well, that's the Terminator question, isn't
right,
it?
Yeah.
And for that, you got to kind of start getting it. If it's important to you to really justify that beyond just it makes sense in a story type way, you have to get into multiple timelines existing and never-ending loops type logic, which you can get into and you can start diagramming. You can shoehorn it into making sense. For me, it's one of those things where it's kind of a trope of time travel movies. This kind of setup, and there's a slight amount of magic logic that you have to apply in order to make a story like this make sense. It's just, for me, a matter of staying consistent to that logic and saying, yeah, this loop exists, and however you phrase it in order to justify it, it's something that can happen.
Yeah, because I kept trying to justify it last night when I was thinking about it over again, and it's sort of a chicken and the egg, because Old Joe, he has to escape to create the Rainmaker, but he can't. But he's not that person unless he dies.
Unless he does, but then that has to... But it's also, it all comes down to, for me, like the one line that you can point to and say, wait a minute, is when he mentions that the Rainmaker has been shot in the jaw already. It has like the missing jaw, meaning that specific thing must have already happened, but he's still in the timeline where that has yet to happen. Although... in my mind, what's happening is because his memory is already shifting to accommodate. That's one of the things that's already changed in his memory and kind of started to shift. It gets into
you say in the movie a couple of times don't get your mind around it.
But at the same time, one of the real pleasures of it for me is doing exactly this. With any time travel movie, I love this. You know what I mean? And I'm really looking forward to people staying up, talking about and doing exactly this and getting into... This is the first time I really had been able to get into a spoilery sort of discussion of this stuff. And, for me, with time travel movies especially, I've never not enjoyed a time travel movie because of a logical inconsistency that I found. If it's a great story and it pulls me through and I feel like I had a great time watching it and I get something out of it, I enjoyed the movie, and then it's almost just added value after the fact, going back in and nitpicking. And
this isn't Dark Knight Rises nitpicking. This is nitpicking because I want it to
exactly, which is added fun in my mind. So,
So here's a specific I thought about. You clearly explained why Old Joe is late coming back on the one timeline because he's in a fight. But he's late the other time, too. Is that specific?
Well, my notion is that he probably... first of all, they showed up late to get to the place because of the whole rigmarole with the wife.
Okay, there you go.
He's a little later when he comes back, when he has the hood off. I would expect that what happened, although we never see it, is he did actually still fight back against the guys, but they overpowered him and were able to get him in with the hood on.
All right. And people are confused a little bit when I talk to them about the consequences of murder in the future, because you specifically say, because of the tracking numbers or something. Yeah. But then you also, he kills the wife.
Yeah, although that's an accident.
Right.
That was not supposed to happen, and they made some half-ass attempt to cover it up with burning down the house, but the truth is they're in trouble because of that. That's a bad thing. Yeah. The young Yahoo, his gun accidentally went off. So this is one thing, and this is one of the things where I go back and forth. Should I have wasted 15 seconds explaining this in the movie? Does it really matter? Because the problem is that it can be like stamping out little fires with all this exposition. This is a detail that I knew how this worked, but I left it in the movie because of tracking technology in the future, they can't get rid of bodies. Yeah. In my head, it's like I could have gone on to say, because everybody has this like nanotechnology tracking material in their body, and whenever there's a death, a location tag is sent to the authorities from this tracking material. So they can't kill the people in the future, but if they send them back, then the person that is not triggered, and suddenly the person is just gone, basically. Also, the police aren't constantly tracking everybody. It's only when they choose to find someone or when a location tag is sent out. And the material in the body, it's powered basically off of the body's heat, and it has whatever, like a 2-year life after the person dies. So it's
you have all this stuff, yeah.
I have all this stuff in my head. The thing is, though, do you really want to? It's not the story. Do you really want to stop for 20 seconds and explain that? Maybe it's, it's fun to talk about. It's the sort of thing you go back and forth as a storyteller, and there are a dozen things like that throughout the movie where. But that leads to that fucking annoying thing in sci-fi movies where every other line is some exposition line that feels like a patch put on a pair of jeans. You know, it's like, I don't know.
Is the Rainmaker closing loops to get revenge?
Or is he just doing it because he's come to power now and he's swiping everything out? Okay. Yeah, that's a good question.
All right, is there any specific reason why you have to close your own loop and somebody else can't kill somebody else?
It's another one of the things where I almost put something in where Abe was talking about this. Yes, their initial... And again, the people even in the future, all they know about time travel is to be afraid of it. And so they're trying to just keep it as tight as possible. So the initial reason they set it up this way was to keep the causality loop as tight as possible. In other words, if someone else kills your older self and he's someone you're going to be interacting with for the next 20 years or something, or just someone else comes in contact with your older self who comes back, the notion of it being a closed loop, that it's you who kills you, and so every bit of evidence is gone from that loop when you die, that seemed very pleasing to the guys who set it up. I almost wrote a scene where I had Abe saying he's been complaining for years to the guys that this is a stupid system, why is it this way? Which is also, it seems kind of like the way it would go down. And that's another one of those things where, it's do you spend, whatever, 20 seconds explaining that in the movie, or do you let it just be a question that people are asking after, and you got to pick your battles?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
You hint at a greater love story between Sarah and Joe, and they obviously sleep together. Was that something that was important to have in there? Did you feel like, was there more to it?
No, I never intended it to be a love story per se. It's not, when Joe makes his decision at the end, he's not making it for Sarah. He's not making like a true love conquers all type moment, and I never wanted that to be in the audience's mind. In my mind, it's two lonely people who are in a really intense situation together. She's been out on that farm alone for years now. It's been a long time since, she's had a real cigarette. And so it's kind of an act of these two lonely, desperate people, and she initiates it. In that way, it's very unromantic, But
we do see when old Joe's memory switching when he first meets Sarah. It flashes back. He's trying to think of his wife, and she thinks of her.
He's trying to hold it. Because this new woman has entered the life. There's a suggestion that if Joe had lived, something could have evolved from there, and I think it probably would have. But within the context of our story and how far it ends up going, I don't think that... I guess in my mind, the important thing was Joe's not making that decision at the end because of love for Sarah. It's more because of the connection he's found and how he sees himself in Sid, and making the decision to save Sid's life and to give Sid this future that he's always felt he was robbed of.
And we talked about the sort of chicken and the egg and this infinite loop. And I was thinking it could have happened billions of times. It could have.
And it draws on. It gets into to some degree. Then you're just it gets to a point where you're just dealing with. Like how you want to talk about it, semantics in a certain way.
Well, what I wanted to know was, but Joe killing himself at the end is sort of a definitive period, right? Was that how it was meant, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You mean as opposed to the loop goes on? Or
yeah, because
yes, in terms of the way we're telling the story, and again, this is largely just the way you choose to talk about it, but we tell the story from a very linear fashion. We tell it from the point of view of one linear timeline going, except for that little excursion to China.
Yeah.
But it's a very experiential approach to time travel. We're seeing what these characters are experiencing moment to moment. So, for example, when old Seth is going and suddenly his limbs are missing one by one.
I watched it twice and it's still hard to watch it. It's so good.
Awesome. you can, on one level, you could say each time that happens, we're dropping down to another timeline. If you step back and looked at it from a graph point of view, you could phrase it that way. But the character's experience is just that it's this way one moment, and suddenly that happens, and it's this way.
Yeah.
So I guess you could say the same thing about the ending. But in my mind, it is kind of, these characters who are living and breathing moment to moment. This is a thing that happens, and now the world is this way.
Do you think Joe, Bruce Willis, older Joe, is different from younger Joe? Because first time, obviously, he feels like he's more learned.
Yeah.
But I felt like he's being equally as selfish just about something else.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's his main delusion. That's his, that's his tragic flaw, if you want to say it that way, is that he thinks he's evolved past it. As an audience, when we first meet him, I think we think he's evolved past it too. Because he's Bruce Willis also. He shows up, he's fighting for at first it looks like he's fighting for love. He's going to find the bad guy. He's going to kill him. He's going to solve this situation. And his young punk self is too selfish to let him do it. And that's one of the things I wanted in the revelation. Hopefully, starts turning it starts to turn in that moment in the diner where that's where you first get the hint of it. Where Joe's like, "Well, if you just show me the watch and give her up, then she'll be fine. If your object is really to save her, we can do it right now."
Yeah.
And you see,
it sounded logical to me when he says it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not to save her. It's obviously not to save her. It's for him to hold on to her, the same way that Joe's trying to hold on to his silver at the beginning.
Yeah.
And so you're absolutely right. And then obviously when he kills the kid, you realize that the wife wouldn't have wanted this. He's not doing this for the wife. He's in the exact same loop that he was in when he was a young man. And it ends up being young Joe who has to see that and kind of evolve past it at the end.
Cool. All right. Thank you.
I feel like we could keep talking.
Yeah,
for another
thank
hour,
you so
man.
much,
We're
Ryan.
keep doing this.